Welcome to another episode of the Mile 99 interview series. It's episode 12. We started these back in May and it's now September. So we've had a few months going here and we've had a lot of great guests. Let me just hand it over to Mike here real quick, my co-host, along with Jessica Harris, to explain a little bit about what we're doing and for anybody that's new.
So we started this series back in May when COVID started. Greg and I are longtime running partners, and we just had this lack of running with people and talking to ultra runners and being with ultra runners and being inspired. We wanted to have a place where we could all get together, hang out, talk to somebody interesting about something they did. And so we've created this series to kind of push this forward.
All right. And towards that end, we have our guest tonight. His name is Bob Shebest. He is an ultra runner. He's a coach and he is an educator. And we're really pleased to have him tonight. Really looking forward to getting into just sort of what he's been doing in the racing world, his whole career, I guess, in sporting endeavors. And definitely want to talk a little bit about the whole education piece of things as it relates to coaching. Some of your races and all that. And so welcome, Bob. Really happy to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good to kind of forget about the world for a while and just hang out with some runners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really just one of the things that we've enjoyed about this is just, I know Mike and I have talked about this a lot, is just kind of talking to people, getting inspired, hearing about some really interesting stories from, races, training, life in general, and then just kind of coming out of it with a little bit of motivation, inspiration, and that kind of thing. So that's what we're hoping to do tonight again. So just wanted to kind of like start out, we always send out a little questionnaire to our interviewees just so people know, and they give us some information that we can use here in the interview. And one of the things I learned about you is you grew up on the East Coast, and I'm an East Coaster myself.
Yeah. Oh man, it took me a long time to get off the East Coast.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's back in, we were talking a little bit beforehand about the BMX freestyle days, and a lot of my heroes were out in California. And then mountain bike racing, a lot of, the best riders and the best courses were out here in California. And so I was like, well, my friends are going to college. I need to do something too. So if I get in the military, I bet I can get to San Diego in the Navy. So I was like, I signed up, they promised me some schooling and I'd get some money for college. And so I, worked hard in school, and the day came after about a year and a half of like choosing billets out of Connecticut. And we're like, come on, San Diego, maybe Pearl Harbor. And maybe it's an island, but I can deal with that. And they were like, there was one billet out and it was for Norfolk, Virginia. And so I took that, and at least I got down to lower latitudes from New England.
Right.
But the whole, I never had that opportunity to get out. And then when my submarine was commissioned, it was going to go to one of two places. It was going to go to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, or Groton, Connecticut. And when you know it, it went back to Connecticut. And then, I ended up having a really good deal at any Connecticut state school for, being a veteran in Desert Storm, which I didn't officially end until 94. And I was like, free tuition coupled with the GI Bill. I'm like, I'm not going to find a better deal than this. And it's cold there. What else are you going to do but kind of study and hit the book? So, and then I ended up in an integrated bachelor master's program. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be here for another year after my bachelor's automatically. So finally 29, I'm like researching the whole country. I'm in graduate school and I'm like, where am I going to go? And I was a triathlete at the time, and Northern California always looked picturesque. I figured I was a little old at that point for SoCal for some reason. And the roads in Sonoma County, Greg, you'll appreciate this. I mean, 30,000 miles of roads on which to ride.
Yeah.
And the topography, the no rain, the lack of humidity and bugs, and then having great races there was good. And I guess the one thing I underestimated was the cost of living.
All right.
But I ended up working for a bike shop for a little bit, and then, East Coast roots. So you know, I still, my heart's still back there.
Yeah.
And having got back for like Georgia Death Race on a couple of occasions, I was like, man, these guys, it is beastly back here with the terrain.
It is. I got to tell you, like, I went back there, what was it, last year? I think it was. My family is in New York State. Actually, I researched it, just quick, did a Google map, and you were in Williamsport. I was born in
Yeah.
Binghamton, New York, so it was about
Yeah.
2.5 hours north of there.
Yeah.
So I grew up there, upstate New York, and then also New England. And yeah, I went back after I've been out here, 6 years, I think. And I went back last year to New England, went on some old trails that I used to run on. I couldn't move.
Yeah.
Like, I did 8 miles. It took me 3 hours. Like the roots, the rocks, like it's just unbelievable difference. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, it is. It's something, but it's interesting. Like when I left the Navy, I said, I'm going to run one marathon, and I'm just going to, you know, that was always my mantra, my philosophy when I was in my early 20s was like, experience everything, try to experience it. Just like, don't say you're not going to do it, just do it once. I'm like, I'm going to do that marathon. And I hated it for about 25 miles. And I was like, and then something happened at the end where I was like, 1 mile to go. And then I got fired up, and I was like, and then 4 weeks later, I was on the start line of another marathon, and that one.
Yeah. So I mean,
horrible. But in Stores, Connecticut, where the University of Connecticut is located, is like, you know, rural, right? So there's a lot of trails around.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember after Boston one year, I jumped into a trail marathon because I ran on trails all the time. So I was like, I was always kind of like dancing around trail running for quite a long time. That love affair with the bike was really hard to kind of, you know, get away from. Mm-hmm. and coming kind of circling back. It's funny how we circle back to the bike, right? And so I ran this trail race, and I was like, I was in pretty good shape. I had run Boston, and it was like kind of recovered, and it was like early June, and it was called the Nipmuc Trail Marathon. And it's like kind of legendary in that area. They've run it for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I hit the turnaround, and there's these two guys in front of me, and I'm like, dude, this is insane. I just ran 2:39 at Boston. Who are these guys running in the woods? Like, what in the world, right? So that was like 2000. And so, you know, years later, I'm in Connecticut, I'm in California, and I start running with this guy, Lee Schmidt, who's was a North Face runner. And I didn't really, you know, I wasn't connecting the dots, but I raced against him. And of course, he was still beating me all these years later. But then I finally connected the dots and said, yeah, you were in the East Coast. We ran together like 15 years ago at Nipmuc Trail, and you're still beating me by the same margins as you were then. You're beating me by now.
Right.
And so it's like, oh man, he was just such, I don't know. Have you guys heard of Lee?
I don't know if I have. No.
Oh man. He's a pretty modest individual, kind of fairly quiet, but man, you know, those guys, man, just so like those that, you know, 15, 20 years ago, it's like, you know, kind of the pioneers.
Yeah.
To a degree. Just such a tough 50-mile runner, dude. And he was just the eye of the tiger late in a race. He'll just like, hey, you can't catch him. It's just amazing. So it was kind of fun. Our paths crossed. I got a triathlon one year, and then our paths kind of overlapped for like a while. And then we got to train together at Lake Sonoma. And then he was like, dude, we're out of here. My wife and I are going to go teach at the island school in the Bahamas.
Not a bad gig.
Private school. We're out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've heard of the Nipmuc. So it turns out my college roommate, he lives in, he went to school with me in Northern New York, and then he may have done some graduate work at UConn, but he lives in Tolland, Connecticut, which is like,
oh man, the Tolland Spring Road Race.
Yeah.
Dude, that's on.
The Soapstone Marathon or some Soapstone.
Tolland's just literally right up the road from the university.
Yeah. And so I went and looked on Ultrasign. I haven't talked to him in a little while, but I went to Ultrasign. I looked him up. He won the Nipmuc in like 2007 or 8, late 2000s, I think. Now, he's in his 50s like me, and this guy is super fast. So I was pretty impressed to see both of you guys had really done well at that race.
Oh, man. It brings back memories. We just moved into this new place up here, and I've kind of like got my man cave going in the garage, and like I've never really everybody has their thing. Some people like the t-shirts, and they're making blankets or quilts, and some people have the medals, and I've always been about the bib. And
Oh
for
yeah.
years I used to write, because the bib traveled with you, you know,
Yep.
it was on you. It's like, it has this special energy. And so I would always like write on the back, and I would like record, like, I got my ass handed to me, or, you know, I was like, felt like, hey, you don't remember that otherwise. It's like this little record. And I just like peel these apart, and I was putting them up on the wall, just reading. And I was like, man, I don't remember ever being that fast. Like, it seems like a whole other lifetime ago with like a half marathon or something. And then the Manchester road race was the big one. That is it's like 4.78 miles. It's on Thanksgiving Day. I literally thought it was going to be like the Tolland road race.
Mm-hmm.
And I show up, and it's like a mini Boston Marathon. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what's going on here? And everybody goes out like a shot. And I was like, these little kids are like, I'm like running as hard as I can. There's like a little girl, she's like 8, and she's like sprinting off the line. It was like, everybody's going for it. And then these families are out freezing, and they got their couches, and they're like clapping for everybody. But I mean, seriously, like, really, have you guys heard of it? Manchester Road Race?
I think I have. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you get some serious elites that show up and just.
New England has a lot, like also
believe
Falmouth Road Race in Massachusetts.
New Haven Road Race.
Yeah, they get some serious competition at these things.
Hey, can I say hello to Ready? Good to see you. Oh, he might be frozen. Oh, there you go. Oh, hey.
Might have lost a little audio there for a second.
Yeah, I'm used to it as a teacher.
Hey.
I'm just like,
yeah,
kid's frozen.
right.
And then they just disappear, and then they come back and they write in the chat, sorry, I missed the directions. What are we supposed to be doing?
Yeah. So speaking of that, I mean, talk to me a little bit about the whole like education side of thing. I'm interested particularly about sorry, I'm like moving my cat's tail out of the way here.
Oh, that's okay.
So
we love animals. We love animals.
Yeah, right. So I'm definitely interested in like the either correlation or not correlation between like teaching kids in that demographic and teaching, and essentially teaching or coaching like your athletes, because you're a coach. Point Positive Coaching is your coaching business. I imagine you have a number of coached athletes, and like you've been doing that for a while, I guess. And when did you start both of those things? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I left UConn in 2003, and then I picked Sonoma County off the map, and then moved out here and put all my chips on like this dream job, and made it to the second interview, but it didn't pan out. And I was like, why do I have to jump into this? I literally had one day off between the Navy and college. I went for a mountain bike ride. And then I started at UConn. I was like, dude, you know, it's just like, and so I didn't get that job, and I was like, damn, you know. And then my fallback was working at the bike shop, so took some time off 2004 and just raced my heart out. But I missed it, man. I missed the graduate, like, you know, intellectual side. And I was like, if I organize these gels at the shop one more time, I'm gonna lose it. So I started subbing, and then I ended up finding kind of my niche with 6th graders. I was like, these are my people. Like, this great energy. They kind of get your humor, and they wanna work hard. They wanna, you know, they still wanna please. So it's pretty cool. So I started in Windsor in 2005, and I started teaching math and science. And I literally was in that room for 15 years, minus the last 2 months, which was not a great way to go out. Thank you very much. No, it was kind of sad. And it was particularly sad because I had a fantastic group of kids that were just, I had this group of kids, 7th period, 36 kids in that class. And it was a high math class, and super fun kids. And they're all getting into Star Wars, and we were like into Mandalorian, and it was a good time. So it was pretty sad to I mean, we still had Zoom. I had 48 hours on total with them by the, you know, April and May, just seeing them every day. But so 15 years there. And then I always said, if we moved up to Loomis, every time we drove by Placer School on Horseshoe Bar Road, because Amanda went to this school that I'm now teaching at, I always said, Amanda, there's your school, honey. And she went there for 9 years, K-8. And I said, if we ever move up here, I want to teach at that school. And you know, it kind of worked out where she, you know, found us a place close to her mom on Horseshoe Bar. And then of course, Pioneer Express is right down the road.
Yeah.
And there's some good kind of trails locally to lately I just haven't been driving anywhere. I'm like, I know there's some food left in this house somewhere. But just like I ride my bike to work and just, you know, like run on the trails here locally. But yeah, so and then coaching started when I was at the bike shop where somebody was just like talking about training, and the woman was like, "You should coach." I'm like, "All right, yeah, let's do it." So that was 2007, and then it started off kind of triathletes because I was doing triathlon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of went through that period of just like working with triathletes, and that's kind of a different beast, right, than an ultra runner. But at the time, there wasn't an ultra runner that was going to, you know, work with a coach.
Right.
There wasn't anybody that was like, "Coach, what are you talking about?
I
What,
just
you just
go out
run
and
and
run.
just run and drink beer? What do you?"
Right.
But then it started to blow up, and then it's like,
Yeah.
you know, there was, you know, 10 years ago there was like 30,000, you know, finishes or something like that, and now it's like 130,000. I forget what the statistics were, but it's very, very much evolved since, you know, 2008 when I started.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hey,
So you can see a
Bob,
huge difference.
one of the things I want to, the early 2000s, you did a lot of triathlons. I want to know more about that. We got actually Karen's on here tonight. She's also a triathlete as well. So, tell us about those.
Karen. Okay. Yeah, triathlon. Well, you know, while I was at UConn, I was running, right? And you know, when you start running, you know, and when I filled out the thing for you, it was like, you tell somebody just getting into running. It's like I had like 5 different responses for that, and I was like, come on, this is your opportunity to spend some serious wisdom, you know. And I was just like, well, don't run yourself into the ground because it's so easy. You're just like, well, I'm just gonna keep running, and so yeah, when I was at UConn, I literally like just ran marathon after marathon, and you know, I started reading and so forth. But you get so ambitious, and you're like in your mid-20s, and it's like, I'm just going to keep running. And after Boston, I took a week off, and then I was back up over 100 miles training for the Burlington, Vermont marathon.
Oh yeah.
And it was in early May, and I was like, man, I need to get my times down. I need to go to the Olympics. This 2:39 is not going to fly, you know. And then eventually I got injured. And then I literally go down to Willimantic. It's south of UConn, and I walk in to the bike shop. You know what happens nothing good happens when you walk into the bike shop. You're going to be your wallet's either going to be really light, or you're going to walk out with a job for the summer.
Yeah.
And it was kind of both. And so, you know, I ended up working there part-time throughout my time. And, you know, they were a bunch of roadies, Greg.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Love love that group.
Oh, dude. And then I got my first Le Mans at Wayfair Bicycles in, it was like Niantic, which is down by the close to the sub base and the Coast Guard Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of fell in love with road cycling. I was like, this is sleek. It's beautiful. It's clean. It's so much better than the mountain bike. And then they were riding, and we were just ripping and tearing. I was like, this is a hell of a good time. And then I was healing from my running injury. And then once I got that back, I was like, I miss the running, man. But I love this bike. So the natural progression was to go to Ironman. But the problem was my swimming was terrible.
Yeah.
So I always joked around that I was like, okay, I got like a master's in running. I got like a bachelor's in cycling, but I'm in 4th grade on the swim. Seriously.
Yeah.
And I got myself videotaped underwater, worked with coaches, did all this stuff. And by the time I left triathlon, like 10 years later, I think I was in 7th or 8th grade, if we're going to run with the metaphor here.
But I mean, your Kona times are pretty impressive, right? Like, I mean,
guys, is it ever fast enough? Reggie,
No.
Is it ever fast enough? Never fast enough.
Never.
You know, so that was, you know, and I really enjoyed my time there. And it was like, you know, it's always been the same thing. If I'm in marathon, it's focused on Boston. If I'm in triathlon, I'm always focused on, well, okay, when am I going to go to Kona? It's always like the carrot. And then in ultra running, it was like, well, I should get around to doing Western States one of these years, but man, this is kind of tough I'm not getting any younger, you know? So, but that's always been kind of the fun. But, you know, Kona was a special race, and, you know, not going every year kind of kept it alive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so for any listeners who are like, oh, I got to do the same race over and over again. If something's really special to you, you don't have to do it every year. You can kind of stretch that out, and then, you know, kind of rekindle your passion for it and come back, and it's kind of new all over again.
Yeah, and I mean, I would expect too, like as you age too, I mean, the experience is going to be different. You know, your training is
It was
going to be
always
different.
different. Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah.
conditions may be different. I mean, there's always going to be like some variation on it that would make it new again in some way.
Oh, there's, I forget what pro, there was a woman who was a pro for Hawaii, and she always said it's like the history in front of the race, except she did it with some accent. She was from Europe.
Hmm.
Um, and so she was like, the history in front of the race is always different, you know? And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's simple, but it's profound because, you know, your training for it is different, and your knowledge and understanding of the training and your execution of the race and the weather conditions and the people that you're with. You know, because the first time I went, I was just a graduate student from, you know, it's kind of, I kind of cashed in part of a 401k to get out there from Connecticut,
Wow.
you know? Yeah. I was like, I got to go, man. I qualified. I was like, you only live once,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know?
yeah.
And, you know, got out there, and then I got out there, right? And then you look at the lists of all the people from all the various states, and you're like, California, Connecticut.
Yeah. Well, you were representing, right?
Yeah, and then my buddy, there was an older triathlete who was really good, and he lived in Tolland, I think.
Hmm.
I can't remember. So many little towns in Connecticut. But he was like, "Why do you want to go out to California and be a big fish in a big pond fish?" You know, I'm like, "You could stay here and you could be a big fish." And I'm like, "Dude, you can keep your fish and your snow and your humidity and your bugs." I
Yeah.
gotta go. I gotta go, dude. You know.
Oh yeah. East Coast, yeah, the bugs, the humidity, all that stuff. I've sort of forgotten it, but whenever I go back, it's a rude
Oh,
awakening for sure.
it is, yeah. And my wife, of course, grew up here in Loomis, and you know she
Mm,
loves the East Coast. And we've gone back on several occasions and spent time in DC and in New York City. And I'm like, and it's usually when it's cold, and it has been. And it's like we were walking to the Lincoln Memorial one time, and my face was frozen. I was like, and she's looking at me, and she's just like, it's like, what is this? And I was like,
yeah.
this is 30 degrees.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I mean, I've been doing trail races, I guess. Like I first started back on the East Coast, just a couple of them before I moved out here. But I think every race I've done out here, I've never done a race where it's rained the entire race. And I've never done a race that's been below 45 degrees maybe or
Yeah.
something like that. Like I just, yeah, I'm kind of spoiled right now.
Yeah.
So I've never had to go through that like really intense suffering. I don't feel like obviously the
Right.
athletic aspect is hard, but the
Yeah.
weather
Yeah.
aspect hasn't been as difficult.
I
So have
know.
you had like that combination of the two where you know you're fit, you feel great, but then the elements or something else
Oh
just
yeah.
come at you and like just how does
Well,
that
it's
affect you?
like I listened to Carl Meltzer on a Coopcast the other day, and he was just saying, you know, he coined that phrase, you know, 100 miles is not that far after he was on the AT.
Mm,
And it's all, we're a product of our conditioning, right? If you're used to humidity and bugs and running on tough terrain, and then you come out to California, you're going to be like, are you guys kidding me? You know,
right.
it's ridiculous. Like you're totally used to it. But you know, I mean, I was the same way. Like I kept kind of upping the ante. And when I got into 100-mile racing, like as a teacher, TRT 100 always suited me well because I could train for it. You hit June and
Mm,
I'm out of school, and you can go big for the entire month and still have like a 2 or 3 week taper.
yep.
So, you know, I did that for a long time, but you know, that's what I knew for, you know, several years. And then I started being like, okay, I need to branch out and try to get to some of these races that are a little inconvenient for me to train for, but experience them. And then ultimately, you know, it led to Run Rabbit, which, you know, would have been held in this month.
Mm,
And, you know, I was there 4 years in a row, and I had a healthy fear of it in the first time in 2015. And then I did well. And then I'm going to come back the next year and I'm going to light it up, Greg. I'm going to go an hour faster. I'm going to get the course record. I don't even know what I'm thinking. And it got cold.
yeah.
And I was not ready. And I guess the year before, like I was just, I had respected the race much more. You know, they were saying Californians don't do well here. I think they were
Mm,
basically saying that we were soft, and I love the race directors, but they'll give Californians a hard time. And yeah, I got to mile 50 the next year, and sadly, my wife came with me because she was like, this is going to be awesome. Bob's going to do great. And I got to 50 and I was super hypothermic and I was throwing up. I had been running with Jesse Haynes back and forth. And I think the last thing he heard from me at like mile 49 was just me retching. And then I never dropped from a race. I'd never dropped from a marathon, never dropped from an Ironman, never experienced a DNF. And then in 2016, I think it sounds about right. I'm at 50. I'm there for an hour and a half and I'm at the fire. And they're like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't even care. I'm like, you know what? I've never, always experienced something. I've never experienced a DNF. I said, I think it's time. I was, second here last year. I don't have any warm clothes. I need to get to the next aid station 6 miles away with a lot of climb. And then I ended up, I was like, okay, just kind of, it's fine. It's been an hour and a half. I'm still throwing up. I don't have any clothes. It's going to be dangerous trying to get up there. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up in the back of a Subaru with Sage Kennedy. And we were bouncing around trying to get off the mountain for the next like hour and a half. And then he's like, dude, what's wrong? And I was like, I never DNF'd before, man. He's like, you never DNF'd? I DNF'd a mile on the track. I was like, what? And then I was like, really? It just didn't register with me. And then I finally got down to like the aid station at like 75 and there was all these people down there. Mm-hmm. And then Kira Henninger was telling me, he's like, hide from Jesse. He still thinks you're chasing. So I had to get back in the aid station. I was like, so Jesse couldn't see me. So he would get out of the aid station because he thought I was like still back there somewhere, and then my wife's like, you look fine. Why did you drop? I was like, I know. And that's it too. It's like, oh, I could totally finish now.
Yeah.
But, I wouldn't say I've ever regretted it. I came back two more years and
mm-hmm.
made it to the finish, but it just keeps year after year. It seems to be more and more of a struggle. I don't quite know. There's a lot of variables at play with 100 miles and you're at elevation. You don't live at elevation.
Yeah.
You're older, and you complain more. You make excuses really well.
Right. I mean, the hypothermia, that's something.
Oh, dude. You should have seen me the next year. When I came back in 2017, I had all this shit with me. Yeah. I was carrying puffy jackets and tights. And people are like, Carl Meltzer was like, what do you got in your pack? And I was like, I got all my stuff, man. It's going to get cold. He's like, no, it's like the mildest year ever. I'm like, I don't trust this race. Never trust 100.
Yeah.
I literally I brought so much stuff. It was insane. And I had a puffy jacket in like 4 different drop bags that year. Mm-hmm. Then I was like, seriously, the 1 year.
Hey, it's better to have it and not need it, right?
Than to, yeah.
But that's
have it not need it, for sure.
But like what you said about cultivating that kind of healthy respect for the race too, I think is like really good advice for pretty much any race. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a 5K, 10K, or 100 miler or whatever. I mean, you can't just think like, oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. It's never a cakewalk, no matter what.
Yeah, Matt Fitzgerald says, I like Matt Fitzgerald. He mm-hmm. He said before, it's beautiful. He's like, you always want to brace yourself. You know what I mean? You don't, because if you expect things to go well and things go sideways, you're a mental milkshake. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, I'm prepared. I deserve this great race. And, that's where, it's so beautiful, like being in different sports. And like, for example, Paula Newby-Fraser before Kona, like in 2007, 2 nights before the race at the big dinner, she's like, my last piece of advice to you is expect nothing and be prepared for anything. Mm. And I say that so much throughout the year to my athletes, because when you get into the race, and the beautiful thing is you start to kind of triangulate and you connect the dots between sports. And so Paula Newby-Fraser said that, expect nothing and be prepared for anything. And Ann Trazen famously would have she would give herself 6 things. Let me count. I'm a former math teacher. Yeah. 6 things that were going to go wrong in the 100. And most people would say, well, why are you being pessimistic? Why are you betting against yourself? You're like, just realistic, man. It's going to go, things are going to go bad. I'm going to fall. I'm going to throw up. I might go off course. And then she would say, like, if she tripped and fell and she would get up, dust herself off, she's like, 1 down, baby. I got 5 more.
Right.
And I never got to 6. I'd always start, I was like 3 things. But if you go back to Matt Fitzgerald and you take those 2 women's kind of mentality, brace yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You're not expecting things to go bad, but you're not expecting things. And I tell athletes too, you talk all about, well, what's going to happen if this happens, but you also have to be ready for things to go well. And that is a whole other side of it, because you have to, if you're racing well and you're catching people late, or you're holding a great position, or you're achieving your goals, or you're performing above your potential, you got to manage that stress too, and not shoot yourself in the foot and like spike your heart rate or forget about your nutrition. Yep. And then just stay within yourself and ride that energy for as long as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the other things I wanted to ask you about relating to this sort of is, you know, as ultra running has become more and more popular, like you said, I mean, now 130,000 finishes, and, you know, obviously many more people over the last dozen years or so getting into this. You're starting to attract higher and higher level athletes. We see this in a lot of sports in general, but there's that mentality at that level, and not a lot of us are at it, but there are people that are at it who can go out and like say, I'm gonna do X tomorrow, I'm gonna do Y tomorrow, like I'm gonna set the course record, I'm gonna win this thing, you know, whatever. Do you feel like that comes from confidence? Do they know that? How can they kind of like put that together? And what kind of pressure does that put you under? You know, even if you were thinking it in your head and you didn't vocalize it, like what kind of extra pressure does that put on an athlete? And have you seen that with people you coach? And just, I don't know, I'm just interested, because I personally have never like felt confident enough to even think about something like that, but I'm just wondering what the mentality is when you're at that level.
Like Babe Ruth, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yep. It's going.
well, I think that if it's definitely a special athlete that can back that up, right? I mean, if you're a Muhammad Ali, you know, I mean, people loved it, but he could back it up, right? And it was his, you know, that was his whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and then, yeah, I mean, you know, I think ultra runners, I think they're, I mean, a lot of times, you know, at least in my time, there wasn't a lot of shit talking, because the sport is so difficult.
Yeah.
And it's so humbling. So people were a little shy to get too cocky, you know, because they didn't want to tempt fate, right? And so you get like a Rob Krar, who was at the center stage in the spotlight for several years, and I appreciate those types of athletes too. But I mean, people like it when you come up and you're like, I'm going to hit a home run.
Right.
And so I think the person that stands out the most for me, that I think that can really back it up, I don't know. I mean, I want to say maybe, you know, perhaps he's worked with sports psychologists. I think some of the best athletes now, like Steph Curry, and I think that sports psychology is really caught on, and people are eating that up. And, you know, especially when you fail. So like Jim Walmsley is probably the one that really comes to mind, where it's a beautiful story, man. I mean, as someone who's gone off course occasionally, you know, when he went off course in, 2016, mm-hmm. Funny story about that. I said I was going to pass him at Roby Point, and I was telling everybody before, you want to talk about like Muhammad Ali, I'm going to get him. Yeah. I was not serious though, but I passed him at Roby Point. Because he was done. He was like, I'm just going to walk it in.
Right.
He didn't care. He was like, Shebest, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
But my wife was like, remember, you actually said you were going to pass him at Roby Point. That's insane. You like willed that. I'm like, I hope I didn't ruin his day. I don't know. I wasn't responsible for that.
We have the whole story now.
I was like, it was Shebest.
Right.
It was his off-course energy that did it.
Right.
You know, anyway, so, but I mean, it's a beautiful story when you have an athlete, because that had to hurt, and you're carrying that around for a year. And that is that real essence of sport, when you can come back from that. And then, I mean, he had to dial it in, like, you know, him and Ryan Sands were talking early in that race in 2017, and Sands was like, so what are you going to do? And Walmsley's like, I'm going hard. Here we go. And Ryan's like, I'm chilling out, man. I'm going to run my own race. Good luck. And it took him a while to be able to keep pointing the bat until he finally hit it out of the park. And then he had to believe in himself, man. It's probably one of the most beautiful stories in sport that I don't hear talked about a lot. But I mean, just keep coming. I mean, you hear a lot about, oh, you got off course. but it's a real testament to his character to keep coming back and then come back again and lower it even more.
Right.
Hit it farther out of the park. It was just, and so when he talks, if you listen to his pre-race talks, you can go on YouTube, you know, anytime and watch that, and you're like, this is probably the most confident ultra runner I've ever seen. Like really saying what he's going to do, and then he does it, and that comes from just failure, right? Because it's huge, and then growth mindset. He's got a huge growth mindset, so that's where I want to believe that he's put some time into, you know, getting his head on straight, and then really listening to people and coming back, because it took a while to kind of rein in the ego a little bit. He wanted to really beat Sage that first year, so yeah, I mean, Walmsley, and I really appreciate just like watching. He has a beautiful stride. You know, it's just like he's got seems like to have and he's I think he's former Navy, former military.
Yep.
Like my Navy guy.
Right, that's right.
You know, and then, you know, course record at Lake Sonoma, that's been, you know, a very special place to me for a long time. So to see somebody light it up, I mean, I go out through some of the segments that he was at the end of Lake Sonoma, and I still can't, like, all out.
Yeah.
Can't go like,
you're fresh. He was at the end of the race.
How does he do that? But I think just, you know, we can learn stuff by watching, you know, people are really good at their sport. Humans are pretty good at watching other people and kind of imitating the motion.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't see all of what
watch
that. Yeah.
No. Well, and you never do, right? You never really see, like, I was never a tennis fan, and then I read Agassi's book Open, and then you get a glimpse. I mean, I was like, whoa. I mean, if you've ever read that book, it is absolutely fantastic. The opening for that book is probably the best opening in a book you will ever read. And if you're not a tennis fan after you read that book, I mean, because you don't see what goes into it. You know what I mean? It's like an iceberg. All you see on race day is the tip of the iceberg. You don't see the monumental amount of, you know, mass underneath the water, which represents the training, right? And the more that went into it, the higher that performance is going to stick out of the water, right?
Right.
So yeah, and you know, Walmsley's still at it. What's he doing? He just went to Hard Rock. He tried to run his ass off. It didn't work out, but you know, it's like David Goggins says. He's like, I didn't do it the first time, and people are like, oh, I didn't do it. He was like, so. And then he was like, David Goggins was talking. He's like, man, and then 10 years go by, everybody forgot it, and then all of a sudden he does it, and then everybody's like, that guy, he finally did it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like that mindset of like, there's no failure except in no longer trying.
You know, I think we've seen that, Bob, in a lot of ultra runners. There's two kinds: the conservative, you know, people middle of the pack like me, and then the people that just go out and they go out for bust. They either fail or they hit it big, but they go out 100% all the time.
Jared Hazen.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know, it's like maybe 10% of the ultra runners are like that. I don't know. We've had some on here. Chris from Reno was like that, one of those guys that goes all out and makes it, or Ray Sanchez is like that, either in the hospital or he wins.
I have a lot of respect for that, man. They got a lot of guts.
Yeah.
You know, I've really tried to, you know, it's kind of like a maybe Eastern philosophy, Eastern religion kind of mentality. It's like, we live kind of in either or society. It's like either you go for it and you're or you're super conservative. And I've kind of like tried to dial things in, you know, I always like the expression, like, you know, set yourself up for success. Like, try to put yourself in a position to do really well. And I think the more you race, the more you get like Alex Varner said after he set the course record at Lake Sonoma, you know, a few years ago, he was like, whether I go out easy or I go out hard, it still hurts at the end. You know, and so the more you are in tune with your body and through training, you know, you have a good sense of how big a check can I write that my body can cash, you know, and every once in a while you're going to, you know, you can go out hard and it's just like, am I going to be able to hang on? You know, you have to have all the variables in place, you know, and then, you know, it's like every once in a while I like to do like 30K because you can just go right at the start and run, you know, as hard as you want, and you don't have to worry about nutrition or pacing or anything, you know, just run as fast as you can. And it's good.
Yeah. It's like a different mentality in all those different distances, I guess. And so like, how do you how do you work with your coached athletes on all those different kind of sports psychology issues and things like that? I mean, do you find that to be, equally or even more important than the physical training they're doing? Like, how do you work with them through all that?
Yeah, back in the triathlon days, I was like, Dave Scott and Mark Allen, they did they went head to head for years. And then finally Allen beat him in 1989 in what was called the Iron War. But, Dave Scott was more analytical and, he was just all about the numbers and the training. And Mark Allen was famous for being more like a Zen Buddhist about it, all by feel. And I feel that there's strengths to both sides that you want to try to integrate. And I think that you need to keep track of the numbers, but you guys know the greater the stakes, right? The more you hold on to it, the more it slips through your fingers. And, working with a good runner, he lives in Sonoma County. His name's Andy Manister, and he's going to Kodiak next week. And, we're in that phase, like 10 days out from the race where, he can't do a lot of training. He's really just executed a wonderful periodized plan. And I'm like, dude, like watch some movies, read some books, from years of doing that myself, like leading into a race. Is like, I like this idea of going into a race and you're almost apathetic, right? You're just like, you're not giving your competitors any of that cumulative anxiety states where you're just like, really, really nervous about it. And it's hard not to care, right? You really want to care, but you have to save that for like Carl Meltzer always said, you want to be a final 25% runner. Like, and Jeff Browning says, it's like, you can't go slay the young dragons until late in the race. And towards the end, probably 2016, 2017, 2018, like I really got to the point, especially after getting beat up in golden ticket races and stuff, and worrying so much. And I tell these athletes that I coach, especially, some of these young guys who are just, they're very hungry for results, is, you kind of have to hold that back, of course, and then say, I want to be a final 25% runner, and pick a spot in the race where you say, this is where the race begins. Like it's famous, in Western states, Forest Hill, right? That's where the race begins. Good luck in bringing in Western states. It's easier said than done, but but it's liberating too. Like the more you put yourself in a high stakes situation, the more you're going to adapt to it. Like I imagine Greg and like cycling and so forth, like you're in those, it just becomes second nature.
Yeah.
And it's not a big deal after a while, and you have to fail. You know what I mean? So I encourage athletes to be like, okay, you're going to train as well as you can. You're going to show up fresh. You're going to execute brilliantly. And that's your process. And there is no failure except in no longer trying. So I've been working with Andy for like a year and a half, and it just seems like he's just eating it up. He's been such a great student. And, I'm trying to, find that balance where you're not super worried about it. You're doing everything. You're focused on everything you can control. And then on race day, it's just about saying, like at Georgia Death Race, it's like a 72-mile race. Last couple times I did it, I was like, the race begins at 54.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about anything. Like, don't even care. Just run your race, man. Just take care of yourself. And then at 54, then you're going to find out who's in front of you, who's around. And I remember we were running for about 2 hours in the dark at GDR last time. And the sun's coming up. Andrew Miller, he's off the front. He like owns that race. He's just, former Western States winner, right? So I'm
Right.
like, okay, he's up there. I'm going for second. I only need to be second to get a golden ticket, right? And I was like, who are these guys behind me? What's going on here? It's like it's 2 hours in, right? So we're like at, 12 or so. Sun's coming up. And 8 guys go by. I just step off the trail and just let them go. And I wouldn't have done that like, 5-6 years before. I would have kept pushing. I'd be like, I gotta, jockey for position early. And I said, the race doesn't begin till 54. Mm-hmm. And it was liberating. Just be like, because I had, you had that confidence in yourself. I wasn't saying, I'm going to hit it out of the park today. I'm definitely going to get this golden ticket, because I didn't know what's going to happen. It's like, expect nothing, be prepared for anything. And then you just get to 54, and the only person that was in front of me at that point was still Andrew Miller.
Just amazing. Yeah.
You know, but there's guys coming up, there's, you know, coming up behind, but you get to that point and you're like, conserve and preserve the future and take care of yourself and run at a low enough heart rate where you can still spare muscle glycogen and process carbohydrate. Because if your heart rate's too high, you're not going to process carbohydrates as effectively. You're going to burn precious limited muscle glycogen, which is just going to burn up fast. And I always tell athletes, like, you're going to walk, you know, if it's a long race, most people are going to have to walk on one of two conditions, on your terms or your body's terms. So you're going to walk early and often to get through this 100, or you're going to be walking your ass off at the end, you know? And so you only have 2,000 calories of muscle glycogen to start any race. And so, you know, the more fit you are, the more you can conserve that and run at higher heart rates, burning fat. But
it seems like, you know, seems like your running style and your training style are similar. I read through your blog today at smartflow.org, you know, and you're talking about like your warm up and your cool down and your training plan. And it seems like there's a lot of advantage to a smart training program and like, you know, you got your build weeks and your rest weeks, a smart training program, and then a smart executed race. It seems like you can really, I see the pattern in all that.
Yeah, and you know, at the same time, I've run like a Lake Sonoma where, you know, I'm going by Sage Kennedy at mile 1.5, and there's been some occasions where you throw caution to the wind. You know, if it's a B priority race and you're just like, I want to see what happens. You know, so I'm never gonna like always be like the blinders on and say I'm super conservative. I'm just gonna, you know, try to, you know, at least at that time in 2015, like I was doing a bunch of 50 miles and my body would tolerate it. But I was really kind of had my sights set on a summer 100, right? And I wanted to use the 50s to kind of really suffer. And so you just go out and you see what happens. But then you see if you're running the second half like 17 to 18% slower than the first half, that's not okay. You're going too hot in the first half of the race. So there's got to be some balance. So I ended up using a heart rate monitor for the first half of my races, and then getting an average heart rate for 50 miles. And my average heart rate for 50 miles at that time was like 143 beats a minute for 100. Well, a successful 50 mile at about Lake Noma course. And then I said, well, if I'm going to run 100 miles, I'm not going to exceed 143 because that's my average heart rate for a 50. And then all of a sudden I took my 17 or 18% second half slowing. I took that down to 9 to 11% slowing in the second half by being more conservative early. And then I was going, you know, hours faster in hundreds, you know, because I was being ridiculously conservative early, and it really paid off. And it's kind of like this faith that you have to have in the pacing process.
Yeah, that is so important to a TRT, I would say.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. So we have like 5 minutes to a Q&A, but real quick, this summer, we wanted to get into this summer. You had a couple of fun adventures before we get into our Q&A in 5 minutes. Go quickly over what you were talking about. A couple of things you did this summer. It's pretty exciting.
Well, that's it. Cause you know, it's like, if it was like a normal year, we'd have our head in the sand and we're like, I got to get my qualifier, you know, it's always the same. I was like, you know, so like the silver lining here was, you know, I knew I was going to start a new job in August. So I said, well, I'll do some races. I'll do Castle Peak. I'll do TRT 50 or 55K or something. And I wanted to do canyons, and, you know, I was just going to do like a race a month, and then it all got flushed, of course. And then I came up here and I started running with Luke Garton and Robert Schwartz, and, you know, they were like putting GPX files on their watches, and I was like, what are these toys? What are these things you're doing? And then I started, you know, I moved up to Loomis, so I got up to Tahoe like on like 8 occasions, and then, you know, mapped out some of my own courses and got on the PCT, and just, there was 2 runs that I did this summer, I would say were probably my favorite runs of all time. Just being out there for 8 hours, 6.5 hours of run time, but you're out there for 8 hours. Cause you're like this, you're like,
yep.
So beautiful. Because now that I'm over here, I can get to Truckee in 75 minutes, and I can get over to South Lake, you know, close to South Lake in like 90 minutes, 2 hours. And I seriously, just being out there by myself for like that time, you know, I had the greatest probably 2 run. It might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but I mean, it was definitely 2 of my favorite runs I've ever done.
Yeah, Greg and I have spent a lot of time up in the area, and we've done it. It's just so, it never gets old. And we spend a lot of time in the canyons and just put them on your watch and set a route and try to get there. And, you know, it's just pretty amazing. We're pretty fortunate.
Yeah, and I saw Lake Aloha for the first time like a month ago. I mean, it blew my mind. I mean, I've always heard people talk about desolation, but I went up there. I started at 6 a.m. I got up at 3 or 4 and got up there. And I was like, oh, some of these mountain lakes are really beautiful. And then I stumbled across Lake Aloha at 8,200 feet. And I was like, I just stayed there for like an hour. I was like, I never wanted to leave.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Magical.
Absolutely. Totally incredible. I now I feel bad. Like any day I'm not like up there. I'm like, I gotta get back. It's up there and I'm not there.
That's pretty much what we spend all midweek doing, is just thinking about places to go up there. So
yeah, I gotta get back up on the PCT, because Truckee's so close. I can go north on the PCT or south on the PCT. And honestly, when I do out and backs, like when I was up there, the hardest part was turning around.
Yeah.
Because it was like, just keep going. You'll be okay. You have 2 gels.
Right. 100 miles later.
Yeah, I was like, it's just crazy because I'm from Sonoma County. Like the trails don't do that in Sonoma County.
Cool.
Nuts. Yeah.
Well, I think we've got some questions, huh, guys?
Yeah. Thanks for coming, people. That's great.
So, Mike.
We have quite a few questions from Facebook chat. Jack Meyer, just to kind of piggyback on your time in Tahoe this summer, he is wondering, is TRT 200 on your bucket list?
Let me ask my wife quick. Oh, she said no. She said no, absolutely not. Sorry, Jack.
Sorry, Jack.
I never say never, because, you know, once you hit 50, weird things happen. You get like these ideas. I'm like, oh, I would totally do it.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. I like 50Ks. 50K. I can't imagine 200.
Me either, but never say never.
More power to them.
Yeah.
More power to them.
Jack also had another question. He said, I know you're a coach and well respected in the running community. I think you're a great guy myself. Have you ever used a running coach, Jason Coop or anything? And I know your mantra is maintain the process.
Yeah, the process, right? Yeah, just like stay in the moment. I mean, running teaches you that. So, I mean, I learned so much from running, and you just kind of like extrapolate that out to life. But yeah, I mean, I've learned, I'm a student of the sport, right? And so I've learned from every coach that's out there. I mean, I just listened to Coop talk to Carl Meltzer the other day, and it was just super fun, you know, just to listen to. I mean, Carl Meltzer himself has taught me so much, you know, just, I mean, and where do you learn that? You learn it from running, you know, 1,800-mile wins over the course of 18 years. And, you know, he's going to write a book. Coop's really pushing him to write that book. So we want that. And then, you know, everybody, it's been, you know, I mean, I've read and studied coaches over the years, but myself, I'm probably not so coachable.
I get that.
It's kind of fun just to coach myself, and I teach 7th and 8th grade science. Like, where am I going? I'm doing good enough.
All right. I think that probably answered the question for Jack. I'm going to unmute you, Clint. Clint had a question, and I'm going to unmute Ken too. They were talking in the Facebook chat, and they came here with a little story they wanted to.
Uh-oh.
What's up, Bob?
How's it going?
So 2020 has my years messed up a little bit, but I believe it was 2 years ago. I was fortunate enough crewing, and somebody was on Ruckachuk far. I was on Ruckachuk near, which is rare because I crew every year, and I've like 2 years that I've gone to Ruckachuk near. And I watched, and I know there's stories. I watched everybody post about what happened with Ruckachuk near. And Ken got in your ear maybe half hour before you got out of Ruckachuk near. but that was
Yeah.
death. And you pulled out of it, and then it was one of the most inspiring, cool things that I've ever seen. And we all cheered. We're like, "Yeah, Bob!" And because you died over there. And
Kind of like this in this chair right here. Be like,
what ultimately pulled you out of there?
I mean, ultimately it was Western States, and so I would never drop it to Western, right? Just, yeah, I mean, you can walk. It was frustrating because, you know, it took me 2 years to get back to the damn race. It was such a big goal, a really big goal of mine, to get a golden ticket. I think I chased the golden ticket, and I was like, oh yeah, I still have to run Western States. Because after I got it, I was like, I finally did it. I was like, oh no, I have to run that race, you know, and it's super hot, and it's like it kind of didn't work out that day, and I just ended up in that chair, and I was throwing up, and it was just a mess, and I just needed time. I knew from my experiences in other 100-milers that I could make it, and unfortunately I had to walk it in. But the worst part about that damn experience was I had to get in the water, and I was being a baby about getting in the cold water, and I had my buddy Louis Secreto with me, and he was like, okay, all these people are out here, and I'm a coach and I'm a teacher, and there is no way I get to drop.
My buddy was actually part of the medical staff there.
Yeah.
And you're now his favorite runner. Like he thinks.
Yeah. Oh, dude,
Like,
that was one of the hardest things I had to do.
But he was the one talking to you while you were, you know. Yeah. I watched all of those things.
Ken Michaels, like, here, take these Jolly Ranchers. Put these Jolly Ranchers. Do this. I was so depleted, man. I was like,
I saw Ken get in your ear about a half mile before you left, and
yeah, he saved me. He really, you know, I mean, everybody there, I was like, I can't let anybody down. This is ridiculous. But I mean, looking back, you do everything you can not to drop. And you know what they say, if you don't have a bone sticking out, like, just keep walking. And I was like, Ken, what do I do, dude? You know, and he's just like, yeah, just Jolly Ranchers, strawberries. And I was just like, I wish my people that were there supporting could just go home, because I just, like, this is not the race that I wanted to have. But, you know, it's Western States, and I got to run in 2016, and that was
Did you hear, sorry, Ken, because I know you want to talk. Did you hear all the cheers when you got up and went to the finish? Like, there was like 100 of us there.
Oh, yeah.
It got loud, bro, when you got up to finish.
I finally got in.
You were there a while, and it got loud. Yeah,
you know what I really remember is getting to the other side, and people were still cheering. That meant a lot. I was like, thank God I got through. That was hard, just getting across that water, you know. And it was a long way, dude. It's a long way when you're walking. I was like, these miles are going by way too slow, because I'm definitely used to traveling a little bit faster. And it was like, but we got some great photos and some great stories, and it's the worst races that make like the best stories. You know, I was like, so, and I mean, I'm proud that, you know, I'm always like, I'm so glad I didn't drop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because, you know, I mean, you know, do you get a chance to come back? You know, not likely for a while.
Yeah.
And then, Ken, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, so to piggyback off of that, has your hydration or nutrition strategies changed since then?
It's like a moving target, isn't it? Oh, man, it seems like it was just really hard I kept changing to, you know, different gels and different strategies, trying to listen to my body. And it's like, as I got older, like last year at Bighorn, I was 45, and it's just like, I think just pushing a little too hard in the middle of the race, and up high and throwing up. And, you know, I ended up in a similar situation where I already dropped at that race 2 years prior. So I was like, well, I already played the DNF card at this race, so I'm going to have to walk it in. And again, it was bittersweet, because, you know, I wasn't able to run the way I wanted to, but, you know, I finished, and at least I can, you know, get the check mark and get the monkey off my back. So I think at this point, when COVID hit, I was like, I got some monkeys off my back before this hit. So, but yeah, you know, I mean, I don't know, hundreds, it's just an elevation and heat and intensity. I don't know. I think a younger body sometimes seems to tolerate the stress a little bit more. And then it's always like the preparation and so forth. But maybe I overthink it. I have a tendency to overthink it. I think that if you might be better off just listening to your body rather than trying to force a nutrition plan. You know, there's an art to the nutrition and the hydration. And I think that hydration's probably, in those experiences, I realized that probably hydration's a hard to come back from. If you lose 3% of your body weight to do dehydration, your performance tanks. You know, so you got to see those early warning signs and make sure that you're in handhelds late in 100, you know, super simple. Just get them in your hands and keep little sips often is what Casey Lichtide always said, right? But yeah, it's 100 miles is far, Carl. It's far.
I think we can all agree on that, right?
It is very
It makes
fun.
me want, listen to his podcast. It makes me want to go run the AT, so I'm a tougher 100-mile runner.
You know, I was going to ask you about that. I don't know if we have time, but I was definitely going to ask you about that FKT attempt in the future on the AT. Get back to your Pennsylvania roots.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I mean, I'm really in love with this new job, and I'm putting a lot of time and energy into it. I want things to return to normal, and I want to do things right, and I want to not hurt myself as I approach 50 and beyond. So I want to get to the point. I definitely want to do Castle Peak. That's kind of a monkey on my back.
Okay? Oh, it's a good one.
All right. So I think if things pan out in 2021, I'm going to, you know, race. I would like to do canyons and have some of those bigger races and have a canyons and have we got to throw a TRT in there. Let's get real, but more like TRT 55K. And then, you know, hit Castle Peak and just get destroyed on that one, then start the school year in earnest. And then, you know, in the fall, I like to just rip it, like stop training. You have this huge base from the summer, do some race every month, like do 50Ks, 30Ks, turkey trots, and then, you know, just have fun. And I recommend that in a year. Like, you can have your cake and eat it too if you listen to your body and you have like some big goal race in the summer, and then just relax and ride that fitness for a while and go race other distances. You know, Sage Kennedy's, you know, a big fan of that too. It's like all surfaces, all distances, and it can really keep your passion for the sport alive. And running fast is a great way to, you know, work on your running economy, right? So turkey trots. I fear turkey trots. You won't catch me at a 5K, but for a turkey trot in Folsom, man, dude, we went all. I was like, I warmed up for an hour at the turkey trot in Folsom last year. We went off and they're running we're like at 5:45, and I was like, my heart is going to. And it seems like I only have maybe you guys think it's like I feel like I have one gear, and when I try to exceed it, it's like the Millennium Falcon. It's like. Kind of sink back into your like go all day 50-mile pace.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot about running, but I'm a little curious. Reggie had a really good question about pizza.
Pizza.
Hey, Bob. So you mentioned being in Connecticut, and one of my bucket lists for a long time. Yes, New Haven pizza.
New Haven.
So my question was, have you tried any New Haven pizza? And if so, what was your favorite place?
Dude, I thought you were going to say Mystic Pizza.
Ooh.
You ever see the horror movie Mystic Pizza?
I have seen that. Or actually, no, I haven't seen that movie, but.
Yeah, it's famous. So that's what I was Mystic Pizza. I was closer to Mystic and Niantic and Groton than I was New Haven. New Haven was like down on the coast on the way to New York. And I only got down to New Haven for like the New Haven road race.
Gotcha.
So I missed out on the pizza. So next time my wife drags me back in January, we'll go to New Haven. Yeah, maybe we can, because I always wanted to take her from New York to Boston. So I'm going to do it. But Mystic, I'll go to New Haven, you go to Mystic.
I will try Mystic.
Then we have to find that movie. It's, you know, like 80s.
Oh yeah, I've seen
flick.
And then I think one of my last questions is from Dan from Facebook. He was wondering about coaching, do you coach elites and middle of the packers and people who just maybe want to finish a race? Do you coach them the same or coach them different? And if so, how?
Yeah, you know, it's my coaching philosophy is kind of tied up with my teaching philosophy, where at the University of Connecticut, it was like a constructivist philosophy. So you're kind of connecting what you want to teach with what somebody already knows and is able to do, right? So you kind of have to meet the person where they are and say, what have you done? Like, where, you know, and that's what you want, right? You know, you want it to be, you know, individualized that way. And you look at what kind of mileage have you done in the past? What do you want to do? What race? And then I like to talk about that periodized plan where you create a plan. How much base do you need? Are you going to tolerate the stress of the training? And kind of like Greg, like in the classics, like the riders in the Tour, they're not getting ready for the Tour de France in March. They're getting ready for the training for the Tour in May.
Mm-hmm.
And that has really worked well for me in the past. When I was training for like TRT, I would race my ass off and do 50 miles in the spring and just do like Marin Ultra Challenge and Lake Sonoma and come up and do Silver State in May and just beat the shit out of myself. And then recover for 2 weeks, come into June, and I'm like ready to rock and roll, super fit, super resilient. And you know, that worked. That was a good recipe for a while. But think about that. Like, find out where your training is, your big block, like 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks out, and then go out, you know, have a taper period, a rest period, and then beyond that, like get really, really fit, and then come into your training for your A race like fresh. And because you don't want to build a base for your A race, you want to build, right? So you need to have a base in there, you know. And so it's highly individualized, you know. And then you have to talk about people's lives, like what's work look like, what are your family commitments. It's not the training you can do, it's the training you can absorb.
Right. At
right?
work, what's that?
Yeah, and like people can people can do some amazing things. And like Dave Scott said in triathlon, he's like, I will always beat somebody that works 40 hours a week, because you know, I just have more time to sleep. And triathletes famously, they'll work out like you know, pro triathletes will sleep 10 hours a night because they're super tired from working out 3 times a day, and then they'll take a 2-hour nap. So that means they're sleeping 50% of their lives. And what's that sleep doing? Recovery, you know, and not to mention all the food and all that stuff. So yeah, we might be able to get in a lot of training with a 40-hour work week, but how are you absorbing that? What's your sleep like? Are you eating a lot of good foods? Or are you cutting corners? So, you know, once you get above 10 to 12 hours of training, run training a week, the recovery becomes more important than the training itself. And you're like, oh, so maybe you're better off with 8 hours of training and getting amazing sleep. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Like just looking at a person as
we always think like less or is more, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, don't get me started.
Well, I did. Sorry. And then David is on Zoom right now, and he has a question about nutrition. Go ahead, David.
Okay. Hey, lots of great discussion. I've been running trails. You know, I haven't done a lot of races in the last 10 years, but just really enjoying the camaraderie in the community and love setting up events, yada, 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 right? But now I'm starting to get, I'll be 60 in about 4 months. And, you know, I've noticed that running distances more than a 50K, I'm really trying to, like you said, stay hydrated. And then you mentioned earlier about nutrition being an art. I'm not really a thrower-upper, so I'm lucky that way. But, you know, when I get to about the 50K mark, I just don't want to eat. And I know I got to keep eating and drinking. I do carry handhelds, so I do drink all the time. But I was just curious in general. I try to eat a variety of foods, so like paydays, and I don't really eat the gels and stuff. And I was curious if you use any of the salt tabs and any of that stuff. I know this seems really basic, but you know, everybody's different. Right?
Yeah, it's trial and error, and you'll have to message Ken because he can give you amazing information too.
Okay.
And it is, you know, you're a case study of one, right? So you kind of have to figure it out. And perhaps if your heart rate and your intensity was a little lower, you could get your nutrition to last a little bit longer. And one thing I started doing with 100-mile racing was I would have like a plan A, and you go with plan A for as long as you can. And for me, that was in recent years, it's been about 11 or 12 hours. And then it's like, my body's just like, done. And then I would try to go to, and like Coop says, Jason Coop said, okay, you should have something that's sweet, something that's salty, and something that's savory, right?
Okay.
So, and then you kind of listen to your body. But I think the fitter you are, and the more, you know, you're accustomed to your nutrition plan, it only works for so long. And so you kind of have to know what works for you, and making sure that you're staying hydrated on top of that. And then pace is a big concern, and elevation and temperature is an enormous factor that's going to shut down your belly. So keeping yourself cool, wearing a white hat and all that, check all those boxes. And then a plan B, you know, the thing I was doing with hundreds was shift to bland nutrition. Like I was using those gels, they're super bland. What were they called? They were like fancy marathoner gels. And then Carbo Pro.
Yeah.
You know, switching over
I was going to ask about Carbo Pro. Somebody had turned me on to that from cycling days, and I hadn't really carried that over into ultra running.
And I look for 50K, 50 mile, 100K. I mean, I love GU Roctane so much, and I want it. And I did a 50K up at Marlette a couple weeks ago because they had a race in Nevada, and it was like 6 aid stations. I had 6 packets of Roctane. Every aid station, just dump that in. I wish that plan could work for 100 miles. You know, it worked for Magdalena Boulet. She put down like 18 bottles of Roctane over the course of, and it works for somebody, you know. So you do need to know what's going to work for somebody is obviously not going to work for another. So having and using like a gallon Ziploc bag, if you're in a really long race and you have 8 stations and you have a variety to choose from. But a product like Carbo Pro with nothing in it but carbohydrate, it's super bland. It feels like water. You're like, are there any calories? This is a 200 calorie bottle, and it tastes like water. You know, at least you're getting some carbohydrating is not an option. So kind of experimenting. And then, you know, sometimes, and with salt, with regards to salt, I'm a big advocate of, you know, you don't necessarily need to take salt because, you know, oftentimes when you're getting cramping issues, it's not really salt. It's you're dehydrated and you're cramping, right? Your body's pushing back on your limits, right? So Timothy Noakes in the book Waterlog talks about, you know, the body is an exquisite machine that's evolved over 200,000 years. Like, you don't have to overthink this, but you do have to notice when you start getting the twinges, you know, are you truly drinking enough? Because if it's 80 degrees and you're working at a moderate effort, a 150-pound athlete's going to lose a liter of fluid an hour. And I think if more people did sweat tests, they would realize that. When I did a sweat test and I came back and I was like, and I just rode a bike hard for an hour. Greg rode that time trial and Yukon went to Tolland and back.
Nice.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm 2 pounds lighter, you know, and that was all fluid, you know, and you lose it. You can't put it back as fast as you're losing it, you know, and we are designed to dehydrate. We're exquisitely designed to dehydrate. So elite, you know, marathoners might be down 8 pounds and they kind of joke around saying, well, I'm not fast at the end because I'm 8 pounds lighter. But we are not designed to overhydrate. That's when you can run into problems. But yeah, trial and error, and then shifting to a bland sports nutrition product, or if real food works for you, then I'm not a big fan of real food until, you know, what hits the fan. I'm like, toasted cheese sandwich, just give me that. I'm walking it in. Hey, Ken, where are those Jolly Ranchers?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck.
And then I think my final question before I hand it back over to Greg and Mike is from Lisa from Facebook. She had a bunch of questions, and so I got to pick one for her, and I am going to pick it. She says, you have a high pain threshold and ability to suffer. How do you develop that?
My wife would disagree. It's contextual, right? It's more like, I don't know, like ego and all that racing, or like, you know, you put like, you know, a runner in front of me and I'll just like, you know, rip an arm off. It's like, I need to get lighter. Just rip this arm off. You know, it's just like, it's so funny. I mean, I think everybody here has done this where, you know, you can't motivate sometimes to go run for 20 minutes, but you'll go out and run 100 miles and the gun goes off and you're in another world, right? And so I think over 20 years of, you know, I've been racing. I started racing mountain bikes in 1995, and you know, you flick a switch. And literally, I mean, I hadn't really been racing all year, and just go up and race that 50K. And oh man, it felt so good. Just be in that space where everything just else melts away but the moment. And, you know, I had a kid, I'm 46. I had like a 21-year-old in front of me the whole time. And then I had a guy behind me, and I was like, I love this so much. Just, that's all I need, is a person in front of me, a person behind me to keep me honest. And then, you know, 50K is beautiful because you don't have to go to the pain cave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that
you were
was
at Marlette, right?
Yeah, Marlette.
Yeah, I was too. Very
Nice.
far behind you.
With our
but
mask.
what a great race.
That was, I almost didn't do it because I had like some running with the boys this summer. I've been like pushing the downhills, and my knees have been like super mad.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you definitely, you know, every once in a while you take your fitness for granted, and you're like, things go much better when I'm fully prepared for these.
Yeah.
But I'd never run on the Flume Trail. So that was, you know, probably again, one of my favorite runs from the summer. I'd never been on the Flume Trail.
That was the first time for me too. And I actually saw a biker fall off the Flume Trail during the race.
Buddy.
He was coming towards me, and he just toppled off. And I was like,
my God, was he okay?
Yeah, he was okay. I stopped. I had cell service.
Oh my God,
but he just ended up sliding. I couldn't see his bike.
Yeah.
But he had friends with him. But I was like, I guess that's one way to get to the lake, but you know, you can ride down.
Oh man,
Right.
I had a runner pass out in front of me once at the start of Run Rabbit Run. We were literally like 2 miles in, and he collapsed, and I had to grab him because he was like falling off the side of this road. I was like,
oh goodness.
But there was lots of people around, and they were like, oh yeah. And then he like woke up, and he's like, oh man, you know how runners are. Oh man, don't worry, I'm fine. Like, you just passed out, bro. I was like, that was my first year too. I was like, oh, I'm taking it. I'm going out easy. I live at 40 feet, and this is going to be 10,000 feet. What's that going to be like? But you know, it's interesting. Like and Casey Lichtide said this, like where she lives, and she comes and she does well at Western States. And it's interesting, like fitness will help you overcome any variable in a race. If you have exceptional fitness, you can your body can tolerate the heat. It can tolerate, you know, the discomfort for longer periods of time. So I've really, if I don't have a high pain threshold, what I've always tried to do is prepare as well as I possibly can, so that I can have fun for as long as possible, resist injury, and recover in a timely manner, right? So that's the real three things with training: is have fun for as long as possible, resist injury, and recover in a timely fashion. And that's what I'm trying to do, you know, with athletes, is make sure, you know, that's it. I don't want to go there and suffer. Then at the end, you're willing to hang on if you're doing well. And the better you're doing, the more you're willing to suffer, right? It's racing. And you always tell yourself, I got a million tips. Like in my head, I'm like, pain is temporary, pride is forever. You know, I got that from, you know, dive school in the Navy. And it was just like, it's just a finite amount of time. Like, just get out there and push yourself a little bit. And then you're going to be really proud of that and then I can look back on the rest of my life and be like, I got out of that damn chair at Western States.
Yep.
It wasn't that bad. I didn't have a femur sticking out.
It all comes down to the bone sticking out of the
like,
body.
why can't I have a bone sticking out? I need that bone sticking out. Then I could just drop.
But if it hasn't happened, you gotta walk it in.
Reggie, let me drop. Just let me drop, dude. Here, get that hammer. Come here. I'll give you $50. Hit me.
Well, that's all I had for questions. I think there's a couple more, but we will be here another.
Sorry, guys. I know.
No, it's all good.
I'm surprised I got my job in Loomis, because they were just like, okay, dude, we need to get to the rest of these questions. I was like, I like the dialogue though.
Right.
No, it's super valuable. And I mean, just based on the number of questions tonight and all the great answers, I think
I'm very grateful that people came.
Yeah.
Wednesday night. So thank you.
Got a lot out of this one for sure. So yeah, thanks so much, Bob. Really appreciate it. We're really glad to have you in the area too. I'm hoping.
Oh man, I'm in love with this place, dude. The honeymoon, I'm giving it at least 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm sure we'll be seeing you out there as we're all, you know, I think we're all trying to get out there more and more now, hopefully.
I miss it, man. Yeah. So, well, you know, one race after another since 1998, I'm like, I'm doing better than I would probably expect. Maybe thanks to the bicycle.
Yeah.
You know, and moving up here has been good. But I'm very sad about Lake Sonoma with the fires there. That's breaking my heart. But I knew it was inevitable. But man, I mean, we're getting crushed on the West Coast and around the country, and it's like, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's been a rough year for sure.
Yeah.
Hopefully that we can fill it in a little bit with our bi-weekly sessions here.
Oh, dude.
Just to let everybody know on Zoom and on Facebook, we will have an extra episode next week, so come back for that. We'll announce that one shortly. Normally we're bi-weekly, but we have an extra special kind of timely episode for next week, so jump on when we announce that. And again, thanks to Bob, thanks to Mike and Jessica for hanging out, and everybody that showed up tonight. Really appreciate it. And go down, and I just want to give a little plug to the aid station down in Auburn. They're open. Get down there. You can buy some beer for takeout. You can hang out a little bit in the back area. They're running, there you go. They got the aid station hat. They're doing their Thirsty Thursday runs, and I know Paulo and everybody would be really happy to see you down there. So give them a shout and see what they're up to. And again, we'll see you next week. Thanks again, everybody.